it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsi.
I'm going to tell you something. If you two ever bother me again the rest of my life, I ain't giving them pension. I can't. There's good friends of mine out there fucking say. Well, he's the boss, you have to do his stuff. That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what the money is. The boss for me is that the boss is your boss.
Welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We are going to do War of the Godfathers Part II. And once again, this segment should be interesting. And this, you guys need to participate as well as if you want to. And so we're going to put 10 new bosses up against each other. Give you a little tiny bit of background. And once again, we're defining prestige as power. A lack of being in prison, trend setting, and business acumen. And this is not going to be, once again, in any particular order. We're going to go through the list, tell you what they made, give you all of the stats, and then come back and rank them. 5 will stay, 5 will go, and these 5 will be added to the list of the 5 from the first week. And then we're going to move to somewhere else, put another 10, and then we're going to have the face-off. That's how this is going to work. I probably should have been more specific in who I was going to put, but I just am throwing bosses out there. This week we have a couple from different territories, and so we're just going to go. All right, so first one, Vito Genovese. Family, Genovese crime family. Hits, 12, 1 botched. Net worth, $200 million. Prestige, 3 out of 5, known for the botched hit on Frank Costello, Appalachian, and some other things. Longevity, he was 12 years as the boss, and he did 11 years in prison. And what we know about Vito is this. He is the one guy who wanted it all, and he wasn't bashful about attempting to pull off some serious shit. Responsible directly and indirectly for 12 hits. And murder was the true equalizer for Genovese. And as we know, he flees to Italy to avoid murder charges. He joins the army and immediately becomes the go-to guy for stolen shit in the army. He also helps on the war front, as well as does a personal favor for Benito Mussolini by having Carlo Tresca killed. And Genovese is the one guy that if you, dared to testify, he would have you killed. And that was his true calling card. Brute force was how he did business. And he got to where he got through violence and underhanded backdoor dealings with Carlo Gambino. And I have to scroll down just to make sure. Okay, I did do that. All right. Number 2, Albert Anastasia, the Magaddino Gambino crime family. Hits 13 to 50, 13 confirmed. Net worth $150 million. Now, the reason why his net worth isn't as much is because he had a short run. His prestige, 2 out of 5, and we base prestige on a ton of different things. He was known for controlling the docks with an iron fist and killing the snitch. Because the snitch, Arnold Schuster, opened his mouth against Willie Sutton. Longevity, 6 years. Prison, 3. He was known for being the waterfront juggernaut, and he revolutionized the docks and the unions that supported them. He's also known as the co-head of Murder Incorporated, that has been accused of killing over 1,000 people. Anastasia was not really loyal to anybody. He was only schemed his way to the top. But he also killed to attain his position. He helped kill both Masseria and Maranzano, and he didn't stop there as he killed Vincent Magaddino and his brother Philip to take over the crime family. And to fully bolster his rise, he would put his brother Tony in charge of the docks, ensuring that nobody could poach. And while many of the new wave mobsters could have cared less about, ethnic lines, Anastasia wanted nothing to do with Jewish gangsters. He didn't even want Jewish gangsters around. And he had a special disdain for Meyer Lansky. And when Lansky didn't want to fork over money to Anastasia, rather than to sit down, Anastasia opened shops in Cuba and the Caribbean to openly compete with Lansky, which created a huge headache for the Mafia. And with Vito Genovese wanting control of the Luciano crime family, by proxy, sort of, the only way to succeed was to kill Frank Costello and Albert Anastasia. Number 3, Angelo Bruno, the Sabella Avena Philadelphia Mafia. Hits 10. With net worth $50 million. Prestige 1 out of 5. He might have gotten a higher number, but there's a lot of historical stuff he had problems with. He was known for being the most successful boss in Philadelphia's history. Longevity, 21 years as boss. Prison, a couple of months. Angelo Bruno, whose nickname was the Gentle Don, was really kind of an oxymoron because he really wasn't gentle. In his youth, he didn't mince words, and he would kill somebody without hesitation, whereas others before him fell into ethnic lines. Bruno didn't. He ventured outside of Philadelphia and made business deals with blacks, Hispanics, and had a lot of rackets with Jewish guys. And the one thing that he was able to do was encroach and go into areas. So I want to change his prestige. I'll give him a 2 out of 5. All right, I'll give him a 2. 1 was too low, 2. Because he did things that were differently. And while many within Philadelphia Mafia earned their stripes, Bruno was a bit different because he went from a soldier right to the boss, which caused a lot of problems on the streets. And he was not respected by anybody. And he constantly was more focused on money than he was on anything else. He forgot about his own men, and he essentially bought protection from New York, kicking back millions of dollars for a seat at the table. But he was smart enough to know that money bought friendships, and it brought business deals. Number 3, Russell Buffalino, the Buffalino crime family. Hits. Nobody really knows. Everybody says 1. And that 1 would be Jimmy Hoffa, but that would have been ordered and involvement. But that says a lot about Russell Buffalino that we don't know. Worth $300 million. Prestige 5 out of 5. Known for being the quiet Don. Known for Jimmy Hoffa, Cuba, and the Kennedys. Longevity, 37 years as boss. Prison, 11 years. And Russell Buffalino was a bit of an enigma, right? Not only was he low-key, but he didn't need to be seen. And there's a lot to say about a guy like that. Russell was tied to much of the mob's historical moments and was known as the one guy who basically completely legitimized himself and his crime family, sort of how Michael Corleone and the Godfather 3 was attempting to do. He was tied to Cuba, the contract on Fidel Castro, the Kennedy assassination, and so many other historical moments in mob history. And at one point, he was not just controlling his own family, but also stepped in as boss of the Genovese crime family when they were having sort of issues and trying to work those out. And perhaps the biggest thing he is known for is controlling the unions in Hollywood and being directly responsible for the changes of the film The Godfather. It has been misreported for decades that it was Joe Colombo, but rather it was Russell Buffalino who was pulling those strings. He is the most successful boss in Scranton's history. And out of respect, the commission asked him not to make another member after his death and to allow the family to go defunct because the commission knew that after Buffalino, that was as good as they were ever going to get. Next, we have Stefano Magaddino, the Buffalo crime family. Hits 3. Net worth $400 million. Prestige 4 out of 5. Known for warring with his cousin Joe Bonanno, Canada, and being the Undertaker. Longevity, 52 years as boss. Prison, not a fucking day. Stefano Magaddino had 2 choices early on in his career, right? He could back his cousin Joe Bonanno when many didn't trust him, or he could go with the rest and move against him. And he did the latter, and those sort of reverberations lasted 40 years. Magaddino was a brilliant mind, and after leaving New York City, after a lot of mayhem, he sets up shop in Buffalo. And he would stretch his empire into Ohio, controlling the Cleveland Mafia in Youngstown, Utica, Rochester, Fort Erie, Toronto, and other parts of Montreal. And the move into Canada was a direct front to stop Joe Bonanno from having basically a monopoly on Canada. And at one point, he controlled all the action in Hamilton and Guelph, Ontario. And from there, he supplied Toronto with narcotics. And being in upstate New York sheltered him from the politics in New York City, which also gave him the ability to be a mediator between warring families back in New York City. The fact that Magaddino didn't spend a day in jail only goes to show how insulated he was. And they also didn't have any informants in those ranks. Still to this day, the amount of informants coming out of Buffalo is very small. You can count on one hand. And there's something to be said for that. Raymond Patriarca, the Morelli, Buckala, Patriarca crime family, murders, 9 hits, net worth $50 million, prestige 5 out of 5, known for putting the McLaughlin gang in the fucking dirt. Longevity, 30 years, prison, 6 years, 4 months. And this is the one guy who doesn't get a lot of press, right? He was not only on the commission, but he had a ton of business with the likes of Santo Traficante, Meyer Lansky, Luciano, and other guys. Patriarca was single-handedly responsible for the ending of the war between the Charlestown mob and the Winter Hill gang. And Patriarca ended the reign single-handedly the McLaughlin gang. And the mob always had been based in the north end of Boston, but Patriarca moved the base operation to Providence. Even while Providence was small, they had infested and corrupted all of Providence in a short period of time. And Patriarca also brought shakedowns to Providence like nobody's business. Everybody had to pay a tax or else. If you dealt drugs, you had to do it outside of Federal Hill. He held on to Federal Hill like a gold mine, being relatively a small family in comparison to others. They have always insulated themselves incredibly well, considering that law enforcement's eyes are all over them. Patriarca, his only competition was an Irish guy by the name of Carlton O'Brien, who controlled gambling and bootlegging prior to Patriarca's arrival, and Patriarca shot him to death in 1952 and just took his rackets. His empire went into Las Vegas, New York, Florida, and even into Philadelphia. He truly improvised narcotics distribution by not selling drugs, but by taking a commission for looking the other way and making introductions. I'm going to introduce you to this guy. This is what I want as my percentage. I'm going to look the other way. You're going to give me a percentage. Patriarca was also a guy brought in to mediate squabbles as well. And Patriarca single-handedly, effectively, what am I trying to say? Revolutionized the racetrack scam. True. He owned a racetrack with Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. So there you go. Carlos Marcello, the Matranga Angelo Marcello crime family, hits 4 to 8 depending, which would have included Kennedy, Roselli, and Giancana. Net worth $750 million. Prestige 5 out of 5. Known mainly for JFK conspiracies. Longevity 46 years as boss. Prison 6 years, 10 months. Carlos Marcello will always be the one guy who could end a beef without a gunshot, right? He was a debater, a consigliere in every facet of how he ran his family. In his younger days, his reaction really honestly was, kill. But as he aged, he learned to do the business was much better when everybody got what was coming to them. And he was a negotiator without hesitation, and his strong abilities to woo politicians to make deals and to keep things quiet for the mob was something that no other mobster really before him had done quite that well or had the capability to do. Other guys like Traficante, there's just a select group of these guys, right? Marcello was able to insulate himself to encroach into other societies that a lot of people couldn't. But Marcello was something else. He was something else. He was political. And listen, $750 million, 430 of that was just in land and in properties. This is another guy that took legitimate income and completely ran the gamut of owning land, and it's still there today. He was also counted on to sit down for disputes and etc. Santo Traficante crime family hits dozens. Net worth $25 billion. Now, that number may seem like astronomical, and people may not believe it, but that is based on inflation too. So that's what it would be worth today. And we went to the height, which was 1965, 66, something like that, right? Prestige 5 out of 5, known for the Florida Bolita juggernaut, Jimmy Hoffa, Fidel Castro, and Kennedy. Longevity, 40 years. Prison, not a day. And Traficante is in a very small box of his own because we have never seen a situation with a father-son combination where it's been very, very successful. Santos Sr. ran a very successful operation. His son came in and ran it even better. It's very hard to find anybody else who succeeds their father and is more proficient. But his father was smart because he sent Santos Jr. to New York after college to get tutored in the ways of the mob. Then he would head back to Florida, completely take over everything. His political power, his ability to expand his father's Bolita rackets made him one of the wealthiest gangsters ever to live. His political influence was staggering, and he was instrumental in gaming in the Bahamas and the Caribbean. He was one of the most experienced and trusted bosses in the history of organized crime. And between him and Carlo Gambino, they had Florida to Maine completely controlled. Completely controlled. Joe Colombo, hits 15 plus. Net worth $25 million. Prestige 0 out of 5. Known for the Italian Defamation League. Longevity 8 years as boss. So from his early days, Joe Colombo, as you know, or maybe you don't, he was a ferocious hitman, right? Not only did he split his time with Murder Incorporated, but he was a subcontracted hitter for the entire mob. He was counted on more for his prowess in murder than his money-making abilities. And as we know, when pushed up against the wall by Joe Magliocco and pressed to basically kill the commission, he balks, telling Gambino the plots against him and the rest of the guys on the commission. And for his reward, he has given what used to be the Profaci crime family, which he renames after himself, the Colombo crime family. He did not have really a high acumen for earning money, but he was able to make it work like a lot of other guys before him. But his problem was his ego. And rather than take the position in stride, he makes a mockery out of the Mafia in the form of his anti-Italian defamation league. He pickets FBI offices, which gets him killed in the end. Joe became uncontrollable, and the very ego that fed him to make him want to be boss is also the thing that got him killed. Tony Duck's Carallo family, Lucchese crime family, 7 murders plus. Net worth $250 million. Prestige 2 out of 5. Unions, he's known for revolutionizing unions and garbage hauling and gravel. 13 years as boss, prison 20 years. Tony Ducks, was a proficient gangster in every single way. Not only did he learn from Tommy Lucchese, just as Tommy had learned from Tommy Gagliano, but he expanded far beyond what the Lucchese crime family had done before. Like Gagliano, Tommy Lucchese took the family and expanded just slightly further than before, but not so far out that it would bring heat. But Tony Ducks was completely the opposite. He took it too far, in my opinion. And it wasn't enough having a slice of the pie. He wanted the entire thing plus yours. And he completely controlled carting, garbage hauling, and wasn't afraid to enforce that through violence. He came up through the 107th Street Gang, and he learned everything from the late and great Johnny Dio. He revolutionized the trucking industry and was the first to infiltrate the Communication Workers Union. He then went to infiltrate the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. And he was basically a union mega boss. In the late 1960s, he would go on to control the Jerome Park Reservoir in the Bronx, and then they would expand into the gravel business, overtaking everybody, controlling a huge monopoly on the gravel industry. He just overextended, in my opinion, but he took the Lucchese's into areas and further than they had never been before, which also in many ways would create his own downfall. And ultimately, for all of his business acumen, because he came up with Johnny Dio, he learned a lot. His own mouth gets everybody indicted, and himself. So, the 10 names we have this week are Santo Traficante, Carlos Marcello, Russell Buffalino, Albert Anastasia, Stefano Magaddino, Vito Genovese, Raymond Patriarca, Angelo Bruno, Tony Dex Corallo, and Joe Colombo. And I'm looking back up to make sure I covered Genovese. Maybe I didn't. That's the one I think I forgot. Oh, no, we did. All right, so once again, these are your 10. Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, Angelo Bruno, Russell Buffalino, Stefano Magaddino, Raymond Patriarca, Carlos Marcello, Santo Traficante, Joe Colombo, and Tony Dux Corallo. Coming in at number 1, in my opinion, based on everything we've discussed, the number 1 out of this 10 is Santo Traficante. Coming in at number 2 for me is Carlos Marcello. Coming in at number 3 for me is Russell Buffalino. Coming in at number 4, Albert Anastasia. Remember, we're only going to keep the top 5. Stefano Magaddino comes in at number 5. Vito Genovese comes in at number 6. Raymond Patriarca comes in at number 7. Angelo Bruno comes in at number 8. Tony Dux Carallo comes in at number 9. And Joe Colombo comes in at number 10. Now, you may say to yourself, how do you come up with these numbers? Well, Santo Traficante and Carlos Marcello and Buffalino, those 3 guys in and of themselves are enigmas, right? But I took into consideration Santo's wealth, the property, the lack of prison, and that gives him the edge over Marcello, right? Marcello is a highly political guy. He also does prison time, but because of his politics and because he was such a wide figure, especially with the CIA, Castro, and etc., it moves him a little up the list from Buffalino, who comes in at 3. As far as I'm concerned, 1, 2, and 3, Traficante 1, Marcello 2, Russell Buffalino 3. That doesn't move. You could move Buffalino to 2 or 3. It's not going to change anything, right? Coming in at number 4, and the reason why I put on Anastasia here is because Anastasia at number 4 truly revolutionized the waterfront. Without him, the waterfront never happens, right? And yeah, he also had a very, very short reign. So some of you may argue with me, well, then that should push Magaddino up because Magaddino, and maybe you'd be right. Maybe it needs to be Traficante 1, Marcello 2, Buffalino 3, Magaddino 4, and then Anastasia 5. But like I said, if you move Magaddino up or down 5 to 4, doesn't really change. He's still in the top 5. Vito Genovese, unfortunately, a part of a lot of different history, but when you compare Genovese to Magaddino, Anastasia, Buffalino, Marcello, and Traficante, he's not in the same league as those guys. And listen, you take the top 5, Magaddino, Anastasia, Buffalino, Marcello, and Traficante, it's hard to put up guys against them because they were just so special, right? And Raymond Patriarca, once again, powerful guy and etc., but he's such in a small territory. Now, you put Patriarca in New York, totally different story. Angelo Bruno, the reason why he's ahead of Carallo and Colombo is because he revolutionized working outside of the box. Just like in the Castellamare War, he's a guy that didn't care about ethnicities. And he revolutionized working outside of areas in Philadelphia that technically were not mob enclaves, and he made them. And his willingness to work with Jewish gangsters is really what helps him. Remember, Angelo Bruno spoke 3 languages, English, Yiddish, and Italian. So there you go. Tony Dux, even though he revolutionized the unions, even though he controlled the gravel industry, his own mouth gets everybody in trouble, and his greed is what really gets him in a jam. Revolutionizing the unions is a great thing, but when you compare him to somebody like Bruno, I think there's a bigger sort of danger in going outside of your ethnic lines like that. It's innovative. It's innovative because what Tony Dux did wasn't so innovative. He just took the model that Gagliano and Lucchese had, and he just expands it, right? And Joe Colombo, forget about it. Other than being a murderer, I don't think a whole lot of Colombo. I really don't. So once again, this is our final list. Coming in at number 1, Santo Traficante. Coming in at number 2, Carlos Marcello. Coming in number 3, Russell Buffalino. Coming in at number 4, Albert Anastasia. Coming in at number 5, Stefano Magaddino. Coming in at number 6, Vito Genovese. Coming in at number 7, Raymond Patriarca. Coming in at number 8, Angelo Bruno. Number 9, Tony Dux Carallo. And coming in dead last, Joe Colombo. So the top 5 are going to move on. And that's going to be Traficante, Marcello, Buffalino, Anastasia, and Magaddino. We're going to take them and contrast them against the first 5. But next week, we got 10 more final bosses coming. And it's historical, not current, okay? So we'll have 10 more. And so what will happen is at the end of the next week, we are going to have basically 15 bosses to choose from, and only 5 of those 15 are going to stay. And it's going to be very interesting. So once again, I know I've repeated it 100 times. Traficante 1, Marcello 2, Buffalino 3, Anastasia 4, Magaddino 5, Genovese 6, Patriarca 7, Bruno 8, Carallo 9, Colombo 10. So shoot us an email at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of the segment, and let us know what you think of this list. For those keeping tabs, this is going to get interesting next week. If you disagree with me, that's okay too. And if you disagree, tell me why. Because you may have more introspection than I do, but I base this on certain things. But some of it comes into likability for me too. So all that being said, that's going to be it for this week on Mob Talk Radio. We will see everybody next week. Same bat time, same bat.